Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chain, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reed.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show. Hello, I hope that you're having a great day. Today's guest is David Henry, and he's the co-founder of Card Isle, an on-demand greeting card company. Let's just say this conversation did not go where I thought it was going to go originally. And as David puts it, 3 engineers got together and started a greeting card company. I was truly surprised at all the nuggets I picked up during our conversation with David today. Enjoy the podcast. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Reed, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by today's conversation. A little bit different guest than we've had in the past, but when I started looking into this, a lot of synergies. But before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Card Isle, and how you came about with this idea.
Yeah, well, it's been a crazy journey. Background on me, I grew up in the woods of northeastern Pennsylvania. When I'm not selling greeting cards, I'm on a mountain bike or in a canoe or doing what I can to spend my time in the woods. So left high school, had a knack for math and science, went to Virginia Tech to study engineering because that was what seemed like the right thing to do. And on the back end to get my graduate degree in engineering, decided to found and start a greeting card company with a few of my classmates at the time, which if you had told my freshman self that that's what I would be doing, I would be a greeting card salesman in my 30s, I would laugh at you, literally laugh you out of the room. It's been a wild ride, but a fun ride. I don't think I could have ever walked down a path over the last 10 years where I would have learned more. And when my co-founder, Stefan, presented the idea 10 years ago, he teed it up with a couple questions that just were very interesting to me. He said, David, when's the last time you enjoyed buying a greeting card? And again, I laughed at him because I have always despised the process of buying a greeting card. The cards never say what you want them to. And he followed that up with said, David, do you have a greeting card in a shoebox that means a lot to you? And I said, I have a couple, actually. Where are you going with this? And he said, I think it's interesting that there's a $6 billion a year industry that really hasn't changed much in the last 100 years. And it creates lifelong keepsakes, but an awful lot of people really don't like interacting with it. Is there anything we can do as engineers to shake things up or improve things in some way? And I said, Stefan, those are interesting questions. I'm down for asking them. And it's been a whirlwind, 10 years. What started with just asking a bunch of people questions in a grocery store morphed into a red box for greeting cards concept, which was kind of a vending machine business model that was fun and we learned a lot from, ultimately didn't pan out. And then 3 or 4 years ago, we pivoted into the space of really building a greeting card brand that is helping retailers with an e-commerce presence sell the physical greeting card as a product on their online stores and channels, just like a Hallmark or an American Greetings or a Leaning Tree might help someone in the physical store pick up a greeting card when they go shopping somewhere. So in a nutshell, that's the arc of who I am and how I came to be in the greeting card industry. And it's been a lot of fun.
This is an amazing story for me. I'm just trying to think through this. Like when you said, if I were to ask my freshman self, you said, I like to be outdoors. I'm like, this is my kind of guy. I love the mountain bike. I love dirt bikes. I love to go camping. And you went to Virginia Tech. I got a neighbor who went to Virginia Tech and some kids in the area looking to go to Virginia Tech, very much an engineering technical school, and then greeting cards. But at the same time, there's a business here and there's a void and you're kind of filling it. And then you also get into what we've referred to in a lot of spaces as phygital, the physical and the digital aspect of it and where these things are kind of blending together. Tell me a little bit more about customizing commerce. Is a term we're hearing more often today, but can you tell us a little bit more about why customizing commerce is important in this greeting card industry and maybe potentially others?
Yeah, yes, I'll start with talking about the term at a high level. And it's certainly one of the buzzwords that are out there as people are trying to figure out what's new and innovative in the world of retail and e-commerce. It seems like those terms change every year. When you go to the next trade show, the next shop talk, the next e-tail, there's a new version of customized commerce. Is it personalized commerce? Is it customized commerce? And I'm going to fall back on somebody who I think is a lot smarter than me. His name is Wesley Rhodes. I had a fascinating conversation with him at Grocery Shop last fall out in Vegas. And he really helped me get a sense of what's going on here. He described it in a way that I hadn't heard described before. And I think that's because a lot of people are talking about these trends at a high level. And what Wesley did is took it right to the core concept, right? And he was in the role of vice president of innovation for Kroger. So I was listening to whatever he had to say because the space that he's in, fascinating, in his career trajectory has been really interesting. But he said, David, what's happening is the digital world is redefining how a consumer can engage with a brand and a retailer through the dimensions of time and space. And at its core, what that's unpacking for us is that a lot of things that have been necessities of how things have been sold are no longer true. Things don't need to be made, standardized in bulk, shipped to a warehouse, sent out to all of the retail locations that they need to be sold through. And then if you're good, 3 months later, 6 months later, 9 months later, the consumer finally sees the product, decides they want it, settles with something that's not exactly what they're looking for, because exactly what they're looking for is out of stock. So they go with another competitor's thing or a different size or a different color. And then there's that compromise, right? That dynamic is being upended in some ways that I find fascinating because my background's in industrial systems engineering and mechanical engineering, and I've been playing in this greeting card space for 10 years. So when I think about customized in commerce, I hear and see that term being used most frequently in it's like a subset of personalized commerce. So if we're going to personalize an e-commerce experience, customized commerce is the ability to take that product and customize some aspects of it. And if you've redefined these supply chain constraints, which may no longer be necessary in order for you to find and get that product that you're looking for, you can unlock a lot of potential, I think, with what your customers are looking for. We didn't know it 10 years ago that that's what we were chasing down. So our content perspective, we're 3 engineers that started a greeting card company. So if we decided to design and attempt to design the greeting card, nobody would buy any because that's not our skill set. So we said, who's good at coming up with greeting card designs? And there's a lot of people out there that are, but they're creatives and they want to be creative. And some of those people aren't the best at selling their designs, nor do they want to focus on that. So, when we needed content, we started a crowdsourced content platform that was basically like, hey, we want to sell your amazing designs through retailers that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get in front of. Let us be the vehicle to get your brand outside of the local summer festival where you pop up a tent and pre-print a bunch of cards and sell them to your family, friends, and neighbors. Like, that's great. But why don't we put them in the local grocery store? Why don't we put them in your flower shop? Why don't we put them online at places like 1-800-flowers.com and get your amazing content in front of those people shopping at those channels that maybe are looking for a greeting card with a dinosaur on the cover of it, or a corgi, or something written in Spanish, or something that you can write the inside message in emoji on. And what's evolved over the last 10 years is this capacity to take what was a very constrained industry, an industry that said, we have 3,000 slots that we can fill at the standard grocery store. What's going to go there? So then we pick of all the possible designs, 3,000 of them, and we've limited what the customer can even see. So that's a little bit about what we think about in that space.
It's quite interesting. I love that 3 engineers start a greeting card company. I love that vision, but then moving into this crowdsourcing, but then it's really getting into this customizing bit, right? This is how it's evolving. We hear from customers all the time, consumers, they want access, they want value, they want efficiencies, they want to be able to have it more on demand. But you said something before it made me think, like, I never even thought of this, but the way you said it was, in the past, if you were lucky, you could predict the future. Meaning, I'm going to get all this stuff, I'm going to put it out there into the marketplace, and then hoping 6 months later, the people are going to like it the way I thought they were going to like it. So I'm actually predicting the future. How is what you're doing now affect inventory management? Is it significant change? Is it a subtle change? I mean, we have some on-demand print aspects, but you also have other things that are going on. How's it affecting your inventory management?
Well, we've gone from a SKU-heavy industry to literally all of our cards start as a blank sheet of paper. And they don't turn into the greeting card that they're going to be designed into until the day they're printed, and that's the same day they're handed to the consumer. In a traditional greeting card company, you are designing today the Christmas cards that are going to be on the shelf in 9 months. They will be printed this summer. Some companies print them here in the States. Some people offshore that process, and then they're shipped here in packs of 6. The merchandiser stacks them on the shelf, and then you have a 9-month feedback loop from design to how did the customer engage with it. And that feedback loop is limited because you actually don't have a straight pipe, a straight data connection to that decision by the consumer to pick up that card. And from an inventory management perspective, we're focused on making sure that the locations have a printer that's ready to print, have enough blank card stock, ink, envelopes, etc., to print those cards in real time. But we don't have to worry at all about the specific, the 3,000 SKUs and managing getting 6 to each individual store. So in some ways it's easier. At its core, it's a fundamental transformation of how inventory is managed in this industry. And that's one of the reasons I get excited about it as an industrial systems engineer. And in doing that, we've unlocked this ability for customer creativity. And on the back end, what you leave with is every single card is unique. There are no 2 cards that are the same if somebody chooses to personalize the message on the inside of the card. And I think we're really just scraping the surface of the ability to personalize way more than just that.
2 things that are coming to mind here. One's a question and one's kind of an observation. It's almost like what you just described is kind of taking us back to the old days of pictures. Go out, take a bunch of pictures, drop them off at the Photoshop. Now I just take a bunch of pictures and maybe I print 1 or 2 at home. Or in some cases, we just did it with my kids. We really want this blown up. So we called up the local pharmacy online, sent it out, and it was done in an hour. I see a lot of similarities of that to what you're all doing. But what other types of businesses do you see benefiting from this customizable commerce environment?
Yeah, phygital, I think was the word you started with back at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, the physical digital.
I think anybody that's blending that space has a capacity to lean into this hard. And there's some constraints there, but if your time to produce a product is less than, or you can conceive of a way where the time to produce your item is less than the customer's expectations of the delivery timeline, I think there's an opportunity for you to lean into customized commerce and explore the places your customers might be compromising on a purchase and might be willing to spend more or buy more frequently or engage with your brand in a more authentic way if there's some overlap there, right? So for the world of people who need something in an hour, you're not going to come up with a customized pair of shoes that's produced on that timeline and then get it to them in an hour, or I can't wrap my head around how to do that. But there's probably also a world where the consumer totally gets that and doesn't expect those shoes to be delivered in an hour. And any kind of event that they're thinking about needing those shoes for is probably not tonight, right? It might be next week. It might be in 2 weeks. It might be in some way. And there's a guy who's a thought leader of sorts that I respect a lot. He wrote a book that I read at the very beginning of my shift to entrepreneurship, which I didn't anticipate making. His name's Peter Diamandis, and he wrote a book called Abundance. And he talks a lot about the barrier to innovation being not actually a physical barrier that's in your way or a technology barrier, but a mental barrier, which is, and it's a provocative shift, I think. But he said, we don't have an energy scarcity problem in the US. Like there's not the cost of energy and everything there, because the landmass of Rhode Island is baked with enough solar energy every single day to power the world's energy consumption 3 times over. What we have is an energy accessibility problem. We don't know how to harness that energy efficiently. We don't know how to capture that. And translating that story, which is in the energy sector, to the consumer space, like we don't even know where our consumers are compromising necessarily on our products in ways that we haven't looked at before. And in the greeting card space, we're seeing 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds in front of our in-store design experiences, like sitting down with mom and having a good time. I was at a trade show the other day, and I think a 14-year-old spent 5 minutes designing a greeting card with a picture of their dog on the cover of it and printing it out because it was their dog's birthday. And I just got a 14-year-old to design a greeting card and loved it. There's not an overlap there, right? You would think that 14-year-old and the greeting card category aren't a great fit, right? The cards that they're getting are being forced upon them from their parents because they're going to a birthday card or they have to write the thank you card. And in a lot of ways, removing what can be artificial barriers to what your product can become by critically questioning the components of the supply chain that are necessary to get that product to those consumers has the ability to unlock new customer segments and demand you didn't even know was there and a competitive edge over the other people that you're working in your space with. So I think if you're digital, if you're in that space and you touch the supply chain or you touch the inventory management or you touch the consumer experience, there are probably low cost, low effort tests you can be doing to uncover if there's some unexpected need here and play with some fun concepts and MVP them and explore whether or not there's a way to more personally customize that physical product for them and represent that you can do that through your digital selling channels in a way that could be really impactful.
Yeah, we've had some other guests on that do like process engineering and looking at things and taking a pragmatic approach to stuff. And this physical digital, a lot of times people don't realize how much we're really into that already, right? I mean, like our lives are being digitized at every turn, and children that are being born today, it'll be 100% digital environments with, physical interactions, but everything from their information, everything they'll get it'll be a digital record. Whereas when we were born, here's your file and it's kept at the courthouse and, those types of things. And now they're electronic. I even think of like grocery stores now. It's phygital. This whole buy online, pick up in store, that's a phygital process. It's a digital interaction, digital inventory to a physical inventory, and making sure that works. And there's opportunities to customize as well. I went to one of my favorite gas station restaurants. I know that to some people it is like already like, oh, and believe it or not, my sister, the vegan, turned me on to this. And I was like, even when she told me, it's like, oh yeah, we stopped here. And I'm not going to mention who they are, but I've been a dedicated customer ever since because there's so much variety. But there's one thing. You can order sliders, right? You can get like 2 sliders or 3 sliders, and they can be hamburger, tofu, turkey burger. It could be chicken, like mini chicken sliders. And you can customize how you want it. Pickles, lettuce, tomato, the whole 9 yards, right? With everything in there. Except you can't customize all 3. And it drives me nuts because I'm like, yeah, I want one with pickles and ranch, and I want one with Swiss and mustard, and I want another one with ketchup and something else. But you can't do all 3. Those are 3 separate orders.
Probably just a barrier to how it was coded and how it was organized.
That's right. And it's not easy to do from this processing spot. So I totally see the whole 3 engineers start a greeting card company. I mean, when you really, for most folks, like, what? And you brought up before, like whole crowdsourcing. A lot of people like to be creative, but they don't want to do the selling side. A lot of people like to be in the supply chain, but they don't want to be on the creative side. And it's bringing all those folks together. I'd like to know from you, how does going from a digital first experience help you with your inventory management, the way you track things, the way you analyze? Are there any lessons that you've learned through this that maybe you want to share with others?
Certainly, you do anything new and there's unexpected challenges that show up, but there's aspects of it that are easier, that are the reasons you try to chase it. And a lesson that I'll share, it's connected to an unexpected positive outcome, I think, of the COVID dynamic for us. And it's that we didn't fully realize how powerful this customizing commerce platform was until, we were still, as everybody was, in March 2020, reeling from the shutdown and trying to figure out what that meant. Are we coming to the office? Are we staying home? How do we reorganize ourselves? And there was so much of that going on. We'd kind of lost sight a little bit of the machine that was still running because people were still buying things and people needed cards and those were getting purchased and our artists were still designing cards. And about a month in, we woke up to the fact that the best sellers were cards that had been uploaded 2 weeks ago. And there were pictures of dogs with face masks on. And there were little messages about, so sorry I couldn't celebrate your birthday in person. I hope this can do the trick instead, or like until we can see each other again. In the midst of that uncertainty, there in my mind is no way we could have said, hey, artists, this is happening. It's a trend. Can you show up and design cards for it? Because it's going to be big. Those cards were the best sellers for about 9 months. And then I think we got tired of COVID and there was some fatigue that was setting in at different times for different people. And those cards were no longer appropriate or funny or popular. So they fell off the popularity curve, but they just showed up as the best sellers. And people were going to our system and saying, I'm looking for a COVID card. I'm like, that wasn't a category of cards that existed. That isn't something you can carve out of the physical shelf and all of a sudden create a 4-foot section of COVID cards tomorrow. And I was blown away at how organically and naturally these artists plugged in to the fact that this was a trend, this was something that we socially wanted to express to people that mattered in our lives, used our platform to get those cards in front of people that were trying to express those messages. And then they were there for people, and still are if people want to go searching for them, but they were there for as long as they were relevant to help people in a very difficult situation express something socially that meant a lot to them. And that was something that surprised us. And it's still something that we see happen on a regular basis. Our inventory management issues are connected to like unexpected peaks in demand around things you didn't even think were a greeting card selling holiday. So like International Pie Day shows up and we have some good International Pie Day content for the right retail partner. And all of a sudden we've printed 150 greeting cards unexpectedly. And it's like totally an unnatural seasonal peak in consumption. And like they're close to running out of inventory and we have to figure out how to get it to them in a hurry. But those are things you see all over the place. And that's just a growing pain of figuring out how to anticipate those and then, to get the supplies to produce those cards out to those locations in time.
Yeah, it's funny how all of us non-creative male types, when we get to Valentine's Day, and we're not the best romantics, we're like, oh, this is that Hallmark created holiday. But I totally see what you're saying. And I've seen a lot of things, people like, oh, every day's a holiday for something now. But it is. And it's organically happening. You see it happening on social media. And sometimes it's just being created because of the event. And when you think back to what you said before, you're creating Christmas cards 9 months in advance. You couldn't anticipate COVID to actually have something, but because of the on-demand and the customizable, you have it all and you have it there.
And then for the consumer, I think most men especially would recognize the fact that like, if you are trying to express to your wife or your significant other or somebody that you're in a new relationship with, like this feeling of love that you are still reckoning with maybe and trying to find words for, and you're doing that physically as a public display in the grocery aisle. I don't know about you, but like I have in the past certainly felt very vulnerable and exposed in that process. But to like do that privately from your phone and recognize that you don't need to pick something that's pink. If something that's pink and has a page of poetry verse that Shakespeare might have written on the inside, like that doesn't work for you. Or there's some aspect, it's like 90% of the way there, but you don't even have to go looking for a Valentine's Day card. But my favorite card in the system is, I wish I knew who had designed it because I'd love to give them credit right now. But there's a picture of a velociraptor and it's a mostly white card with a velociraptor at the bottom and it says "rawr" at the bottom. And then on the inside, it says means I love you and dinosaur. That card can speak to so many different situations, right? But "rawr" can mean whatever you want it to mean on the inside of the card. So that can be a birthday card to a friend, right? That can be a joke just because card to somebody that's going through something tough. And we are seeing people engage with cards as a category that haven't before, or people that start the process and saying that I'm not really a card person. And they go through the experience of designing a card and they say, whoa, maybe I'm not a card person because the way cards have been shown to me before didn't work for me. But I have a card in a shoebox. So there's a time for the right card that I am a card person.
You brought up the whole in public versus private. I was in a drugstore once in my small 1 square mile hometown as a 16-year-old, and all of a sudden the neighbor walks in with their daughter as you're trying to pick out like some Valentine's Day card for some person you're smitten with. And now the whole town knows about it. And you go home, before you're even home, your mom knows all about it and your sisters are peppering you. And you're like,
and then you're so embarrassed that you never give that person that card. And what could have been such an amazing relationship never starts because you're just embarrassed.
That's
or
right.
maybe you're bold enough to actually hand that card over and you had more guts than I did when I was 16, and more power to you in that situation. But
how do you see your industry changing over the past decade, or where do you see it going in the future? Like, sustainability comes to mind for me. My wife and I have talked about it. We've been married many, many years now. And it's like, okay, same Valentine's Day thing. And like, I wish you would write something else. So sometimes we write our own cards, and sometimes cards are expensive. And I get the card and I read it and they're like, are you keeping it? Are you throwing it out? Like, what are you doing? Like, there's so many different angles and things, but where do you see the industry going, and does sustainability play at all?
It's such a good question, Reed. Nobody knows, but if I peer into my version of the crystal ball to answer that question, you have to start by expanding the industry to the world of social expression. So A greeting card is a way to socially express yourself to other people. And there's been a place for that. And that place has changed and will continue to change as the world and the ways that are available to you to socially express yourself continue to evolve. And I think there's some really interesting trends at play, and they manifest themselves in like everybody stack your phones in the center of the table at dinner. First person to touch their phone buys dinner. Like I have a 16-year-old younger sister, and they manifest in things like her getting off of Snapchat and Instagram for a couple weeks just to see what that's like, right? And they manifest in the big conversation that I've heard. One of the CEOs of one of the big social media companies the other day talked about the negative impact of this dopamine hijack cycle that these platforms can be, and the fact that you engage with them with a desire for a positive outcome, but 8 out of 10 times you leave the platform after an hour feeling worse than you did when you went in. And it's early, but I think we're waking up to this big shake that we gave the world of social expressions over the last handful of years. And I don't know where it's going, but I see signs that interacting authentically in the physical world through a physical medium is still important. And I see an opportunity for the greeting card to remain a piece of that. Maybe you're not going to be your grandmother and send 35 cards a year. I don't need you to. You don't need to necessarily. But there are occasions that if you found the right card to get that message out there to a friend or a family member or a loved one, like that has a staying power that a text doesn't. That has a staying power that a digital card in an email doesn't, because I try to live in zero inbox world, but every email is kind of a task to deal with, and it's either going to the trash can or it's getting archived, you know. And I think you want to come home at the end of a hard day and be reminded by a bunch of photos and cards on the fridge that you're surrounded by a bunch of people that love you. And I don't see that going anywhere. And I think that there's a whole lot more exciting stuff we're going to see come out of the phygital innovation space, where we are trying to marry, right, what we can create digitally and what we want to see and interact with in our physical lives, because that's where the connections are. They can happen through Zoom very effectively, but a physical reminder that you have a community around you, people that care about you, goes a long way. So I think there'll be a place for a card for many, many years. I'm excited about being a piece of, through Cardile, providing a vehicle for people to find cards that are more relevant than they might be able to find elsewhere for those types of occasions in the coming years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I do think that the physical aspects will be more cherished and more valued. I don't know anybody that doesn't like getting an out of the blue card in the mailbox. I was actually thinking the other day, we were doing some self-improvement type stuff, and I'm struggling with social media. I love it in one aspect and I hate it on another aspect. And I'm going to try something where I leave a social media platform to actually have more interaction with people, because I think a lot of times what's happening is I'm seeing them, but I'm not really talking to them.
Oh, 100%. You're on something that's such gold, because you feel like you're connected. So I had a buddy, he lives in Rochester. He called me the other day. He just called me to say hi. And it was a great 15-minute conversation. But if you feel like you know everything that's going on in that person's life, what are you going to talk about? That was a cool picture I saw last week on Facebook. There's no substance there. I want to hear the story straight from you.
That's right.
You know, I want to talk about the next mountain biking race that we're going to plan together. And that's exciting. And I think we've unintentionally, perhaps, or unexpectedly forgotten how much we've lost there by how much time we've given to those social platforms.
I agree with you. All right. So last two questions. We ask everybody this. The first one I have for you is, what's your favorite technology right now? And it could be anything from something on your mountain bike to something you're doing at work. It could be anything personal or business related. But what's your favorite tech right now?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back to, I did a skiing trip with some friends, and all of a sudden they were like, David, are you sponsored by Koros? Because you won't shut up about how cool that watch is. So it's a GPS watch, and it's on my wrist right now. It kind of lives on my wrist. So it does all the things that GPS watches do, but they've engineered it with the intention of battery life, right? So like Apple Watches need to be plugged in every night or they go dead, or I've never owned one, so I don't know. Like years and years and years, I never bought a smartwatch because the idea of taking it off and plugging it in every single night never worked for me. And they've got a whole range of different options, but the one that I've got I do a lot of like long distance endurance sports. So that means I'm going to be like in a canoe and paddling for 18 hours a day, multiple days in a row. You can actively be tracking your location for like a week at a time between charges. When I'm just doing like day-to-day regular runs and stuff like that, I have to charge it once a month. And if you weren't doing any activity tracking, you have to charge it every 60 days. It's transformed the ability to track a day of skiing or just turn it on and forget about it and then come back at the end of the day and say like, wow, that was cool. Or like you want to look at a particular part of a ride or, and you can go back into the data and say, my heart rate did peg when I was on that climb. So that's something I'm particularly jazzed about. If you're an endurance athlete, you spend a lot of time out in the woods and battery life is something that frustrates you, check out the Koros brand, 100%. Big time fan on that front.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one is, what's something that's just blown your mind? It's changed the way you look at the world, right? It could have happened as a child, an adult, just something. It could be simple, it could be complex, but what's something that's just blown your mind you want to share with everyone?
I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record here, but I think the stuff that's happening with ChatGPT and AI or whatever you want to call that is that in combination with Wesley Rhodes' comments that what digital technology is doing is redefining how we engage across the dimensions of time and space, right, is hugely impactful. And he shared those comments to me at a show where the metaverse was the conversation. And the conversation that was happening was, how do we make a 3D representation of the grocery store shoppable in the metaverse? And he was basically just saying, that's a miss. The miss is about bridging the gap between somebody wanting to cook a meal and connect socially with their family while they're cooking that meal and sitting down and enjoying that meal. Like anything other than that social connection that's happening over that meal is a disconnect. And what we should be thinking about as technology innovators is how to use technology to create more authentic connections across those dimensions of time and space. And it's totally reframed how I think about what's happening out there. And I think that's one of the reasons I brought it up today. So we're at the beginning of that very much shaking up retail, e-commerce, education, like you name it. There's an industry out there that's constrained along the dimension of time or space. We're going to see that shake up pretty aggressively here in the next couple months. I
agree with you. Well, David, I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today. This conversation did not go anywhere where I thought it was going to go. 3 engineers start a greeting card company. I'm just going to be saying that for the rest of the week now, I think. I love how you shared how you went from like the red box concept to full automation and how leveraging crowdsourcing, different aspects, and used to have heavy SKU inventory to manage to now blank sheets and being on demand. And also, I don't know if folks picked up on it, but customization is just that. It's customization, and we have different time constraints on it. It could be within the next hour, within the next day, 2 days, a week. And we should all be looking at our businesses and how we can maybe be more customizable and more flexible. I love the example you gave about, March 2020 with dogs with masks on their greeting cards. It's just, we all remember that. But if we did it the traditional way, we wouldn't have had any of those until 9 months later anyway. Well, David, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. Really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Reed. Thank you so much to you and the GS1 team that made this podcast possible.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.